Good morning out there, everybody, and welcome to Thursday. This is Dr. Morgan Denny. I am the lead faculty for the Institute of Clinical Excellence in the Primary Care PT division. So today is Leadership Thursday. So the topic today is one that is near and dear to my heart. And this is something that I've kind of delved into at different points in my life, like thinking about how change happens, right? And now this is a never-ending rabbit hole, right? Of understanding of how people make decisions. How do they end up where they are? How do they learn what they do? How do they become confident or totally lack confidence? Why do they make these choices? Now, to be fair, most of these questions had nothing to do with PT at first, at least for me. A lot of it was curiosity, right? Like noting how different people felt about topics or in different situations, how one person would react one way and others very, very differently. Later in my life, it became about teaching sustainable living tactics and trying to figure out how it was we could make the biggest change. So figuring out what affects people and how they become who they are is a big way to kind of figure out how do you create change in humanity along a purpose, all of those kind of things. Now, of course, current events around us have left us asking, like, how did people become racist? How is it that I became racist? Why do I hold these ideals and how did they get there? How do I become anti-racist? Right? And where did these things come from in the first place? And it's important that we kind of delve into that and kind of dissect not only within ourselves, but in those around us, how this happened. Because if we don't do that, we can't look into the future and figure out how to make a change or how to make it different, right? And how do we figure out where people landed on different points in the spectrum? How is it that I could have grown up in the same town, gone to the same school as someone, and yet I'm in one spot and they're in another, right? And how does this relate to change, right? We know that change happens over many levels over a period of time, right? Some would argue that true change comes from wars or large demonstrations or dramatic shifts in climate, stuff like that. And I agree. I think that is completely true. I mean, others would say that true change only comes from change in governing regulations. And I agree that that is true also. But I really believe that true change comes from people, right? It comes from the choices they make on a daily basis, the way they are, the way they live their lives, the way they treat other people. So if change comes from people, how is it that we as both PTs and humans, synchronously, magically, we can actually be both, can actually become leaders in order to shift how humanity is in the world for the purpose of good? I know that sounds like a big responsibility, and it is, but we also have contact with a lot of people. So it's important that we think about these things as we are interacting with people throughout the day. Now, keep in mind, clearly right now, like I'm thinking about racism and the protests and all the things that are happening around the murder of George Floyd and all of those kind of stuff, and figuring out how it is that so many people have been very aware of these things going on. No matter if they're Black or another person of color or if they're white, a lot of people are very aware, and some people until now, or maybe even now, are still oblivious. So how is it that we figure out how people have learned this, or we've gotten to these different stages, right? Now keep in mind, while obviously we know where my mind is at, a lot of these things about how we as humans learn things and then change applies directly to humans, or to our patients, which are also usually humans, unless you're a dog therapist, which is cool. So, it's like we meet patients and they're consulting us to figure out a change, but we're also figuring out where they're at and how do we provide that change? Where do we meet them? Like, what do they need from us? So these are all things that kind of, while they define humanity, also really relate to PT. So I see leading change in layers. I think it's like a layer cake, right? I'm thinking wedding cake style, though honestly I'm not a big fan of cake, but maybe it could be ice cream cake if it were for my birthday or wedding. But anyway, you know what I'm saying, right? Layers. So there's large layers and there's multiple layers till you get to the very top. They're each stacked one on top of the other. That kind of a situation, that image in mind. So I believe that the top layer are the zealots. Now, for those of you who don't know what a zealot is a person with uncompromising pursuit of religious, political, or other ideals. So these are the people who take a change, a thing, an idea to the nth degree, right? So in the health world, we would say like these are the people who are definitely fitness forward, but they're doing tons of activity during the day. They would never miss an exercise session. Diet, nutrition, sleep, meditation, all of those things are first and foremost. They come before anything else. They would never be the ones to skip something that had to do with their health. That is always the priority. Everything else comes second. You know, in the world of sustainability and sustainable living, these are the people who don't drive, who have alternative sources of power, who live off the grid, who grow their own food, who create zero waste, right? Like that's possible. Those are the zealots. Those are the people who are really out there doing it. And those are important people, right? They're at the top of the layer cake. They're showing that it can be done. In this current state of change, right? Like the people who are the zealots who are at the top of the layer cake, these are the people who are out there leading the protests and speaking with governing officials and doing presentations online for the rest of us so we can learn and, you know, leading grassroots movements. That's where those people are. They're at the top of the layer cake, right? Now that top of the layer cake is a tricky place, right? And it's a place that to most of us seems unreachable, impossible. We're never going to get anywhere near there. But the important thing is that the people at the top of the layer cake don't seem impossible to everyone. Because in the layers of the layer cake, the people right below the zealots, the top, those people are probably doing the same thing that those zealots are doing, but maybe just 2/3 as much, maybe 3/4 as much, maybe half as much. They don't see the zealots as an unattainable summit. They see them as people working just a little bit harder than they are, doing just a little bit more, right? So it's important that they have leadership in the zealots so that they see that it's possible to do more, to be better, to be successful as a human in that way. Now, while the zealots help lead the upper layers towards greater change, right, there are people that are in the middle. Those middle layers, they're very important to support the top and also make sure that the bottom has something that they're on top of or something like that. That sounds strange. Anyway, for example, I have a patient who is a yoga guru. That's how she seems to me. She teaches yoga, and she does yoga probably 2 to 3 hours a day. She's very health conscious and is aware of her diet and that sort of thing. But she knows there are places that she can make some changes where she could be doing better in terms of health and wellness and yoga, right? She sees those examples in yoga magazine or on Instagram posts of different ideas, things that she could implement. It's important that she has that representation in an upper layer of the cake for her to see that change is possible, that she can do something more. But it's important to remember that she is also a leader because during her classes, her students see her as the guru. They see her as the leader. They think that she is doing a little bit more than they are, and they're right, to be healthy and fit and do the right things for her body. So those people are seeing her as a leader, even though she has leadership in that top of the layer cake, right? So the layers go on, right? Like you can use any example. You can use fitness, sustainable living, anti-racism, any of it. All those places that were needed to make a change. But beyond getting to talk about cake, which sounds really good right now, we need to talk about what the point is, right? Like how is this cake important? And I would say the reason is that we need leaders at every layer of the cake of change. No one at the bottom layer sees the top and thinks, yeah, that's totally attainable and I can do that right now. Like said no one ever. No one who is doing zero exercise and eating crap sees the yoga guru who's doing a ton of exercise, eating perfectly cleanly and meditating and gets good sleep every night and says, yeah, I can totally do that tomorrow. No, that's not a thing. Like as humans, we're not like that. We all need mentors and role models, friends, therapists, someone who is a similar or slightly higher level to us. We all need the zealots to show us at the top of the cake that it's possible, but we also need someone to provide us a more feasible example that's closer to our level. Additionally, you know, something is better than nothing. Like it's not always enough, but it's better than nothing. So like at differing layers, people will be willing to make different amounts of change. Like, it shouldn't be an all or nothing system, right? Like, can you imagine for a moment that your patient walks in and after their very first evaluation, you give them an entire month's programming and sleep hygiene ideas and all these dietary changes, as well as like ergonomic adjustments and all the other cool stuff we do. It would be overwhelming, right? It's too much because change is tricky and it has to be done a little bit over amount of time in order for it to really stick, in order for it to really be change. And all change is really like that, right? Like if we want to be leaders in a positive change, whether it be towards health or anti-racist ideas in society, that we need to understand that we can all be leaders and that we can all be students, right? Like as layers of the cake, we're constantly should be seeking advice, getting better, but we also should be constantly aware that we are leaders, that we represent a change, and that people are looking to us. We don't know where everyone is in the layers of the cake, but we can be a representative at any time. That's why leading by example is very important, right? Like patients often come to the clinic and they walk in and you say, "Hi, my name is such and such. I'll be your therapist," or however you introduce yourself. And they will generally see a fit human being. Even though you don't say out loud to your patients, "Oh, this is my fitness program and these are the things I eat and these are the things I don't eat," and et cetera, we are generally fit humans. We are fitness forward. We believe that it's important. We prioritize it, hopefully in our own lives, not only that of others. So when patients come in and they see that, you're already leading by example. You are already a layer of the cake and representing something that is possible. Because here you are, a human in front of them, someone they can relate to, hopefully. And so as that layer of the cake, you are providing an example. That said, I think it's important not to just acknowledge to ourselves, but also to our patients that they are leaders. Like I think as PTs, we know we're leading. Like we're a consultant, we're giving information, we are leaders in the health and fitness world. But we forget that our patients can be leaders too. We forget that when we send someone home with an exercise program, their kids, their family, their friends will potentially see that they're making a change. You know, it's like we forget that sometimes change happens more easily, where someone's coworker is starting a walking program and that's seen, and then someone thinks, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So then they all start walking, they all start getting more fit, they become a visual representation within the office, and pretty soon that layer of the cake is rising up, but they're also bringing lower layers with them, right? So it's important that we realize that we can be multiple layers at a time and that change can happen in ways that we're not realizing or we're not intentionally creating, but also to use that as encouragement to our patients or our friends who are trying their best, you know, to know that they also are leaders and they are also bringing people up with them. So, you know, when you stand up against a racist remark or a microaggression made to someone in your presence, you send a message. Just like the person walking in the parking lot at their work sends a message, right? That message is not only to the aggressor, this is not okay, this is unacceptable, but it's also a message to the people around you who didn't say anything. It's a message to them that says, you could have done it. I did it and nothing bad happened to me. You don't have to be afraid. And the next time those people are in that situation, they are far more likely to speak up, to say something. Just like if someone sees the patient walking around the parking lot a million times, when someone says, "Hey, do you want to go for a walk?" they're far more likely to say yes, because now they've seen someone else do it. Someone that's in a similar layer that they can relate to, that they now think, I saw such and such do that. I can do it too. It's not going to hurt me, right? We need to be empowering people not only to do the right thing, but also to understand they're leaders, that people around them will follow them if they make a positive change, and that they can do some good in this world, that they have power. Okay, so the next aspect of understanding the layer cake theory of change is realizing that you can really represent multiple layers. Now, at ICE, I feel like this is really the idea or the concept of meeting the patient where they're at. But I think, again, remembering that even if a patient comes in and we are an exercise zealot, we are at the top of that layer cake, we can't necessarily be that to our patient. If our patient isn't exercising, if they're not ready, they're in a very, very different layer, it's important that we recognize that. Now, as PTs, I think we're pretty good. Like our skills are fairly honed at reading people and the situation and trying to understand where people are coming from in order to build that therapeutic alliance and realize where they're at, and so that they can follow through with their exercise and make changes because they trust you. But that doesn't mean we can only represent one layer. So it's important to remember that even if we are a visual representation of a leader, of a fitness person, of an anti-racist, if we are talking with someone else who we're trying to affect, we don't need to show off, to put it bluntly. Like, it's important to kind of come to the layer the person is and realize where they're coming from in order to provide a good example, but not to do it in a way that says, I'm so far above you, I'm so much better than you, I've surpassed you in this level of change, I'm way up towards the top of the cake and you're way down here. We need to be able to bring that to people in forms of actionable items, right? To, for example, talk to people about what we went through, or share some of the things that we did in order to change and become the person we are, right? Like if you're talking to a person about losing weight in the clinic, which you should be if they're overweight, then being able to share things that have worked for you makes it more personable. It means you've been at that layer of the cake. It means you've struggled there too. It means you have succeeded and moved forward. And it means it's possible. We have to be able to provide examples like that if we want to see some of these change. Now, the last thing about understanding the layer cake of change is that every layer is valuable. Realizing that each of us can do something as leaders, and that not even the zealots at the top of the cake started out there, right? We need to slowly just realize that we're all leaders, and that when we're bringing people up, everyone's important. And I think recognizing that is important, because when it's very easy as a leader or just a human to see or note someone who is doing something, let's say at a lower layer of the cake than you are, and you might perceive that as bad or wrong. It's important to address that, but it's also important to address whether it's wrong or just not as much as you want it to be, right? Because as I said earlier, sometimes something is better than nothing. That doesn't mean that we don't stand up and that we don't address wrongs, but sometimes people just aren't doing as much as you want them to do because they're not comfortable. And again, we need to figure out a way to be examples in leadership that allow people to understand that they too are leaders, that they too can make a change and can lead people and get better and do more. Now, eventually, as we're all brought up to the top of that layer cake, the layers will smooth out, right? That's when our layer wedding cake thing made of ice cream becomes a boring ass sheet cake. And that's okay. That's actually great. That's the goal. When an actual change happens, that's when the zealots become normal. When that ideal way of living or being or seeing the world becomes that's just how it is. Duh, right? That's the goal. So we need to kind of bring everyone up in the layers of change until we can flatten the sheet cake. But I think it's important that we remember we can't create lasting change simply by demanding that everyone becomes a zealot. But we can all play a role to lead people towards the top. Be brave. Don't be afraid to climb to that next layer of the cake. And don't be afraid to give anyone else a hand up on your way. All right, that's all I have for you today. I hope that helps us all to be stronger leaders and recognize the leadership potential in everyone around us. The song of the day today is Sweeter by Leon Bridges. Hope you all have a fantastic day that is productive and powerful.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.